Texas seems set to join some of the other states that rapidly move to restrain voting rights as much as possible following the special elections in Georgia and the November results. We got more than 24 GOP-sponsored election bills under consideration in just Texas, by the way. Over 200 nationally, 24 here in Texas, as lawmakers seek to tighten ID requirements and voter rolls, limit early voting, and up the penalty for errors. And that may be one of the most interesting ones, actually. So we're gonna circle around to those penalties for errors. But the state senator Brian Hughes is sort of point man on this, a Republican who chairs the State Affairs Committee, and introduced a 27-page omnibus bill with several new restrictions and penalties. Says that the 2020 election increased interest in legislation Texas lawmakers were already keen on, which is sort of just admitting it. No, dummy, you're supposed to pretend that people's concern about democracy is why we have to do it. Ben, he's just admitting, no, they already wanted to do it. Now they've just got a little bit more cover to start fighting back in Texas.
Yeah, no, this is they're saying the quiet parts out loud, and they're a lot more emboldened than you would expect for a party that's been roundly defeated. And this is, I think this is the next evolution of Trumpism. While Trump is out of power, they have the boldness to just say exactly what they're thinking, and who cares with the implications.
Yeah, they certainly don't have to worry about their voters. Like, no, it's not like Republicans in Texas are gonna see that and be like, hey, wait a second, I'm worried the party doesn't support democracy anymore.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's the, I'm sorry, I don't mean to cut you off, but that's the other part, right? So long as they have just enough support in their own party, they will continue to push the envelope further and further in terms of disenfranchising people, in terms of their racism, in terms of their white supremacy. As long as they can keep enough to win their primaries, they'll go with anything.
Exactly, yeah, and their voters just correctly understand that we get them into office and they'll do things that benefit us, or at least they'll think that they will. They'll mostly just distract them with cancel culture stuff while giving money to rich people. But they think that the Republicans have their back, and they value that 1 billion times more than vague philosophical concepts like democracy or anything like that. I don't know why the Republicans thought they had to pretend to support democracy a couple of years ago, but that's gone. Now, they all believe that there was fraud, even though importantly in Texas, the Attorney General Ken Paxton's office spent 22,000 hours looking for voter fraud and uncovered just 16 cases of false addresses on registration forms. That's out of nearly 17 million voters. So those people who accidentally put the wrong address are truly 1 in a million. But they're not gonna let a complete lack of voter fraud stop them from stopping people from voting. And so what forms are those gonna come in? Like with a lot of other states, many of the provisions would directly address creative ways that Texans voted during the pandemic, like overnight early voting and drive-through voting, as well as mail-in voting, which Trump particularly protested. Several bills also seek to ensure that non-citizens stay off the voter rolls and urge election officials to aggressively purge the rolls. And a slew of bills would add or increase penalties for fraud or mistakes made by voters or officials in running elections. Now, the fraud doesn't exist. We just demonstrated that. But potentially there could be mistakes. They didn't find those either, but there could be. So here's what I think is one of the most interesting parts about the Texas version of this. In Hughes' election bill, which he said he expects will be the vehicle for any voting legislation coming out of the Senate, they would impose civil fines on local officials who don't purge their voter rolls quickly enough. $100 for every voter the Secretary of State's office identifies as improperly being on the books. Now, what's interesting about that, Ben, is that this investigation has shown that that isn't really a problem. But you'll note that they are fining $100 for every person improperly on the rolls.
Right.
How much are they fining for every person improperly taken off of the rolls?
Oh, nothing. You get a kickback, a rebate.
Yeah. So if you were in charge of this, Ben, which way would you err?
Well, so I'm just thinking about the time I was purged off the rolls in Florida back in 2004. And I'm just thinking about all the different ways over the years the secretaries of states, particularly of red states, have been extremely aggressive in purging voters off the rolls. That said, this is it's almost like overkill, because in these states, you have extremely aggressive secretaries of states and, or actually, I'm sorry, not secretaries of states, but supervisors of elections in the different counties who take it upon themselves to be vigilant about these things. Now, with this incentive, maybe he should have just flipped it and said, listen, for every person you get rid of, we give you $100. Because that's the only way I could see some of these Republican supervisors of elections actually doing more than what they're already doing. But I think they're just trying to create a chilling factor. What they're really trying to do is a chilling effect and to intimidate not only any loose or maverick supervisor of election who actually wants to do the right thing, they're trying to create a chilling effect to intimidate them into carrying out the same type of suppression that we've seen relentlessly over the last couple of decades.
Exactly. And we can see this and know that it's almost certainly going to pass in Texas, and the Texas governor would gladly do it. I mean, he personally got involved in trying to stop people to vote in the run up to November election. We covered that. And we know that this is going to result in people being purged, whether opportunistically or to cover their ass. And we'll cover those stories in a year or 2 or 3 years. And what are you gonna do? They still control Texas. They can do what they want. The only thing they want to do is stop people from voting, like in Georgia, Arizona, and other places. They saw more participation as literally the worst thing that could have happened. And so you'll notice, by the way, that what are they focusing on? Which crisis in Texas? Is it what happened with the weather and access to power and all the people dying? No, it's people voting a couple months before that. That's the thing that they have to hit as hard as they can.
Yeah. That's I mean, the future looks so grim when you consider the priorities of our politicians. Like, they're not worried about how we survive as a species. They're not worried about how we survive climate change. They're not worried about 11-year-old boys who die from hypothermia in Texas in their trailer. They're worried about, minorities voting them out of power.
Check out the Damage Report podcast each day, wherever you get your podcasts, whether Pocket Casts or Stitcher or iTunes. You can join me as I give you the news and stories you want, with a range of co-hosts and interview guests jumping in on the fun each day. Again, that's the Damage Report, wherever you get your podcasts. And if you get them at iTunes, don't forget to rate and review. Sometimes I'll read them live on the show.